Chapter 1. The Price of Peace. The moon loomed full and red above the gathered masses, casting a bloody sheen over the great marble steps of the Shadow Court. Lanterns flickered in the crisp night air, their flames defiant against the thick tension that suffocated the kingdom of Virelia. Thus, with the meeting behind her and the storm of destiny gathering on the horizon, Isabella Moretti pressed forward. Her steps, though heavy with the burdens of responsibility, now carried a subtle energy of hope, a hope that somewhere amid the tangled lines of evidence and the murky allegiances of the underworld, she might carve out a path not just to defend a notorious criminal, but to illuminate a truth that lay hidden in plain sight. And in that promise, even as the rain continued its soft, steady refrain, the seeds of change were quietly sown. Aria. Stormclaw stood at the base of the ceremonial altar, a prisoner in a silver-threaded gown that clung to her like chains. Her bare shoulders were stiff, her chin lifted high despite the hollow ache in her chest. Every eye was on her, wolves, witches, fae, and vampires alike. The entire supernatural realm had gathered to witness her surrender. She was 21, the daughter of the Northern Alpha, born of war and bred for defiance. Yet here she was, unmarked, wolfless, and being offered like a lamb to the very predator she had sworn to loathe all her life. All for peace. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "You must do this, Aria. The pack will die if you refuse. This is bigger than you, bigger than your hatred. Hatred." It scorched her veins even now. The crowd fell into a hush. A cold wind swept through the night as shadows thickened at the end of the aisle. He had arrived. King Rayleigh Draven, sovereign of the vampire dominion, glided through the crowd like a phantom dressed in midnight. His cloak billowed behind him, woven with the silver of fallen stars. His face, pale and sculpted, was beautiful in the way a dagger might be. Sharp, dangerous, mesmerizing. Crimson eyes met hers, unreadable. Aria's breath caught in her throat. She knew that face. Those eyes. That voice. It couldn't be. Memories surged, of a raid when she was a child, of screaming, of a vampire standing over the broken bodies of her kind, of fire and blood and cruelty. She had never forgotten the smirk he wore that night, the way he watched her with curiosity instead of mercy. It was him. She was marrying the monster who murdered her people, but she didn't flinch. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. She held her stare, jaw clenched, even as her heart screamed in protest. Rayleigh ascended the altar steps, slow and deliberate, as if savoring the moment. "Aria Stormclaw," he said, his voice velvet and venom, "do you come willingly to join your life with mine, for the sake of unity and peace?" Liar, manipulator, murderer. But she forced the words through gritted teeth. "I do." The High Priestess began the binding incantation, but Aria barely heard it. Her world had narrowed to one thought, cold and clear. "I will never love him, and I will never forgive him." Yet even as she vowed it in her soul, something in Rayleigh's gaze flickered. Something human. Regret? Recognition? She couldn't be sure. The ritual ended. Applause rose like thunder, and the pact was sealed in blood and shadow. As Rayleigh extended his hand to her, Aria placed hers in his, ice meeting ice. He leaned closer, his breath brushing her ear. "You have fire in you, little wolf. I wonder how long you'll pretend to hate me." She turned her face slowly toward his, her smile as sharp as broken glass. "Longer than you'll live to see." Chapter 2. The Crimson Palace. The carriage doors creaked open with a heavy groan as the wheels ground to a halt on cobblestone. Aria didn't move. The Vampire King's palace, known among the supernatural as the Crimson Palace, rose like a beast from the mist. Its towers were sharp and unforgiving, jutting into the sky like broken fangs. Gargoyles lined the walls, their stone eyes forever watching. Even the moonlight seemed dimmer here, as though the shadows whispered warnings that she had long stopped listening to. "Welcome home, my queen," Rayleigh said, offering a hand as he stood by the door. Aria ignored it. She stepped out on her own, her boots hitting the stone with defiance. "I'm not your queen," she muttered under her breath, loud enough for him to hear. He smiled faintly, not at all offended. You married me, didn't you? That makes you mine in the eyes of the realm. Only in the eyes of the realm, she snapped, brushing past him toward the looming gates. The palace doors opened with a hiss, like breath being drawn in. Rows of vampire guards stood on either side of the entry hall. Tall, armored, their gazes empty. The scent of old blood clung to the air, faint but ever present. Her wolf stirred uneasily, still faint, still silent, but restless. I'll show you to your chambers, Raelith said, catching up to her stride. And they've been prepared with your comfort in mind. Heated floors, no mirrors. She threw him a sidelong glance. You think I'm afraid of what I might see? No, he said. But you look like someone who's been running from herself for a long time. She stopped walking. He stopped too, facing her with unreadable eyes. You don't know anything about me. Raelith stepped closer, his voice dropping low. Not yet, but I will. Raelith stepped closer, his voice dropping low. Not yet, but I will. Their eyes locked in a silent battle before she turned on her heel and walked faster, leaving him behind in the cold hall. The chambers were luxurious but suffocating. Blood-red curtains, black marble floors, velvet cushions, and tall shelves filled with books that smelled of age and dust. There were no windows, only a single stained glass panel showing a wolf locked in battle with a serpent, with blood raining from the sky. A servant girl bowed and handed Arya a folded note before disappearing silently. No name, just ink and paper. Trust no one. The king plays a long game. Find the West Wing. There's more to the pact than you were told. Her heart jumped in her chest. She read it again. Had her father known something more? Had she been lied to? Again? Arya crumpled the note and tossed it into the fireplace, watching it curl into ash. Nightfall brought more than silence. It brought the court. A knock came at the door. Your presence is expected at the feast, my lady, a voice announced. Arya changed into the dress laid out for her, another silver and black gown, this one barer than she liked, its sleeves hanging off her shoulders, the bodice hugging her like armor. Her hair was braided back with silver thread, her skin powdered pale. She looked like a vampire's prize, a pretty trinket to show off. The banquet hall was a spectacle of opulence. Gold chandeliers flickered with enchanted flames. Long tables overflowed with exotic meats, fruits, and blood-filled chalices. Vampires filled the room, noble, elegant, dangerous. As she entered, the room fell into silence. Then came the whispering. She's the werewolf bride. She hasn't even shifted yet, I hear. So why her? Raelith stood at the head of the long table, wineglass in hand, dressed in black silk. He smiled faintly when he saw her and extended a hand. Reluctantly, she took it, if only to keep up the illusion. May I present my wife, he said to the crowd, and Lady Arya of the Stormclaw pack. Polite applause followed. Insincere. They sat. Arya kept her posture regal, ignoring the eyes that lingered too long. She refused to let them see how hard her heart pounded. That's when she arrived. Lady Selene, regal and cruel, floated into the hall in a gown of sheer sapphire and diamonds. Her silver hair flowed behind her, and her fangs flashed with every smile. She did not sit. She slinked to Raelith's side like a ghost of past sins. I see your tastes haven't changed, Raelith, Selene purred, eyes never leaving Arya. Some still prefer wild things with fire in their eyes. Selene, he said in warning, but she only laughed. Arya met her gaze, chin raised. And I'd rather be wild than fanged and forgotten. Gasps rippled through the court. Selene's smile vanished. Oh, well then, she said sweetly. We'll see how long your flame lasts in this place. Hours passed, the feast dragging on. Arya barely touched her food. She excused herself eventually, unable to bear the pretense. She wandered the hallways alone, her footsteps echoing as she traced the palace's west wing, the place mentioned in the note. The halls grew colder, the air heavier. She turned a corner and found a door, simple, wooden, unlike the others. Locked. Arya knelt and picked at the mechanism with a hairpin. Whispering a trick her brothers taught her as a child, it clicked open. Inside was a small room filled with parchments and scrolls. On the walls hung sigils, blood magic, ancient contracts, and names etched in black ink. She stepped closer and read them. Stormclaw, Draven, Binding Pact. There were more than marriage terms here. There were blood seals, sacrifices, and something worse, a clause that bound their life forces. If one died, so would the other. Her breath caught. She didn't hear the door shut behind her. "Curious little wolf," Raylith said softly. She spun, heart racing. "You followed me. I wondered when you'd find this room." He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "It's part of your right, as my wife." "Don't mock me," she snapped. "You didn't tell me we were bound by death." "No, I didn't." His voice was calm. Too calm. "Because you would have used it to your advantage." She stepped closer. "You don't trust me. I don't trust anyone." Silence. Arya stared at him. There was something under his mask tonight. Tiredness, pain, a crack in the marble. "Why bind us like this?" she asked. "Wasn't the marriage enough?" "It was never about the marriage," Raylith replied. "It was about deterrence. Mutual destruction. If either of us dies, the pact collapses, and so does the fragile peace. That's the only thing keeping both kingdoms in check. So I'm your hostage, and I'm yours." She hated that it made sense. Still, it changed everything. Raylith moved to the door. "I won't stop you from snooping, Arya. Just know that truth in this place is a blade, one that cuts both ways." When he left, she remained still for a long time. Then she looked back at the scrolls and realized her war was far from over. Chapter 3, Wolf Without a Howl. Arya woke to silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that pressed down on her chest like a weight. No bird song, no footsteps in the corridor. Even the ever-present whispers of the palace had gone still. She lay in bed staring at the velvet canopy, her hand resting on her stomach where she had dreamt the wolf lived, coiled, sleeping, waiting. But when she reached inward, there was nothing. Empty. Again. It had been like this since her 13th year. Every blood moon passed, every rite performed, every elder consulted. Still, the wolf remained locked within her, as if it knew something she didn't. But last night had changed something. She had felt the stir, just a flicker, like a spark in cold ashes. A warning, a promise. Her fingers curled into the sheets. She needed answers. The castle's library was a cathedral of knowledge. Vaulted ceilings, candle-lit alcoves, and towering shelves stacked with books older than some bloodlines. Dust floated in the air like forgotten magic. Arya stepped inside quietly, her boots muffled by thick crimson carpets. The librarian, a gaunt vampire with ink-stained hands and hollow eyes, looked up and nodded without question. She made her way to the section marked Lycanthropy, Origins and Bloodlines. Scroll after scroll, book after book she devoured. Most were useless. Stories of the moon goddess, pacts of old, rituals she had memorized since childhood. But then, tucked between two broken spines, she found something different. The suppressed shift, cursed blood, and the silent wolf. Her heartbeat quickened. She flipped through, and words leapt out at her. ... Common among born Lycans to shift between the ages of 1-2 and 1-8. ... See aces of delayed shifting linked to soul-binding curses, blood-forged deals, or the severing of ancestral ties. In rare instances, a wolf may refuse to awaken if it senses a spiritual or magical tether, a forced bond that chains it to an unnatural fate. Arya's breath caught. Her fingers trembled. The castle's library was a cathedral of knowledge, vaulted ceilings, candle-lit alcoves, and towering shelves stacked with books older than some bloodlines. Dust floated in the air like forgotten magic. Arya stepped inside quietly, her boots muffled by thick crimson carpets. The librarian, a gaunt vampire with ink-stained hands and hollow eyes, looked up and nodded without question. A magical tether? Like a blood-bound marriage pact? She remembered the contract scrolls, the dark ink, the hidden clause that linked her life to Raylith's. Her wolf wasn't weak. It was chained. "Fascinating choice of reading, wife," came a voice behind her. She didn't jump this time. Raylith stood between two shelves, dressed in dark gray, his hair loose and falling past his shoulders, his expression unreadable. You've made a hobby of following me, she said, snapping the book shut. I keep finding you in the most dangerous corners of my home. It's becoming a concern. You mean a threat? His eyes gleamed. You'd know if I saw you as a threat. He stepped closer, slowly, deliberately. She held her ground, even as her pulse quickened. You've been asking questions, he said, about your wolf. Are you surprised? No. But you won't find what you need in these pages. Arya narrowed her eyes. Then where? Raelith hesitated. It was the first time she'd seen him uncertain. There's someone you should speak to, he said at last. She's a seer. She lives in the old wing, deep beneath the palace. Few remember she's even there. And you trust her? I don't trust anyone, he said again. But she owes me a favor. The old wing was colder than the rest of the palace. The walls dripped with condensation, and the stone grew darker with every turn. A single torch in Raelith's hand lit the path. You've been quiet, he said as they descended. Maybe I'm trying to avoid saying something I'll regret. The old wing was colder than the rest of the palace. The walls dripped with condensation, and the stone grew darker with every turn. A single torch in Raelith's hand lit the path. You've been quiet, he said as they descended. Maybe I'm trying to avoid saying something I'll regret. I don't mind your temper, he murmured. It's honest. She shot him a look. You don't know a thing about honesty. He didn't argue. Instead, they stopped at an iron door with claw marks carved deep into its surface. She doesn't like visitors, Raelith warned. Neither do I, Arya replied. He opened the door. Inside, the seer's chamber smelled of sage and rot. Bones hung from the ceiling. Runes drawn in ash lined the floor, and in the center sat a figure cloaked in layers of black and red, her face veiled. You bring the wolf girl at last, the seer rasped, her voice layered like many women speaking at once. I felt her howling in her sleep. You can help her? Raelith asked. I can tell her the truth. That is all. The seer turned her veiled face toward Arya. You dream of fire, of chains, of a scream that never comes. You carry a curse not your own. Arya stepped closer. Tell me how to break it. The seer extended a gnarled hand. Give me your blood. Arya glanced at Raelith. He gave a faint nod. She took the dagger from the seer's altar, sliced a shallow line across her palm, and let the blood drip into a bowl carved from bone. The seer stirred it with a black feather and hissed. There is a bond, older than your birth. A choice made by your father, sealed in blood, traded for power and protection. He offered your wolf in exchange for survival. Arya's vision swam. What? He feared war, the seer whispered, so he gave you away before you were born. Your wolf sleeps because she was bartered like silver. No, Arya breathed. He wouldn't, but he did. Raelith said nothing. Arya turned to him, her voice shaking. Did you know? No, he said quietly. Not this. The seer leaned forward. You are not a broken thing, girl. You are chained, and chains can be shattered, but only in blood and truth. Arya's hands clenched. Her entire life had been a lie, a bargain struck in shadows. Thank you, she said hollowly. The seer smiled beneath the veil. Beware the night of the second blood moon, little wolf. On that night your wolf will wake, or you will die trying. Back in her chambers, Arya stood before the mirrorless wall, staring at nothing. Her hand still throbbed with the cut, though the bleeding had stopped. Raelith leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You should rest, he said. It's been a long night. I don't want rest, she whispered. I want vengeance. He watched her for a long time. Then, quietly, you're stronger than I thought. She looked at him, truly looked, and for the first time she didn't see a king. She didn't even see a vampire. She saw a man, one with his own secrets, his own scars. But that didn't mean she forgave him. I will break this curse, she said, with or without your help. Raelith stepped forward, close enough to touch. His voice was barely a whisper. Then I'll make sure you survive it. Their eyes locked. For a moment, just one, they weren't enemies. They were two people bound by something neither chose, but perhaps both needed. Chapter 4. The midnight masquerade. The palace shimmered with unnatural beauty. Moonlight streamed through the tall stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscopic patterns over the marble floor. Musicians played haunting melodies on ancient strings. Velvet drapes billowed like breath, and the scent of roses, spiked with iron, floated through the halls. Tonight was the midnight masquerade, a royal tradition where vampires paraded in masks and their mortal allies mingled in silk and shadow. A show of power, of unity, a farce. Arya stood in front of the mirrorless wall, her gown clinging to her like silver smoke. It bared her back and dipped dangerously low in front. Delicate chains ran across her collarbones, and a single wolf head pendant rested over her heart. Her mask was black lace threaded with moonstone. It left her mouth exposed, bold, vulnerable. Her stomach twisted. She hated this. A knock. She turned. Rayleigh entered, dressed in all black, his own mask shaped like a raven's beak, sharp, elegant, and cold. But it was his eyes that gave him away. Always. He looked at her for a moment longer than necessary. "You look like a storm," he said. She rolled her eyes. "Save the flattery. Let's get this over with." He extended a hand. "For show?" "Only for show." She took it. The ballroom was already full when they arrived. Whispers followed them. Masked nobles lifting glasses, veiled dancers pausing mid-twirl. She could feel the stares like daggers. The wolf has finally come to the feast. She hasn't shifted yet. Weak. They say she's cursed. Rayleigh leaned down. "You could bare your fangs and silence them." Arya tilted her head, lips curling. "You'd enjoy that too much." He chuckled. "I would." As the music swelled, they joined the first dance. His hand found her waist, warm despite his undead blood. She placed her palm on his chest, resisting the strange sense of ease in his hold. "You're surprisingly graceful," she said. "I've had centuries of practice, and yet you still trip over politics." His eyes gleamed behind the mask. "That's a far more dangerous dance." They twirled past nobles in fox masks, serpents, stags, and crows. The night pulsed with veiled threats and careful alliances. Vampires and werewolves, fae and witches, all pretending peace while hunger thrummed beneath the surface. "You haven't told anyone what the seer said," he murmured, spinning her. "No," she replied. "I'm still deciding who I trust. And me? I don't know yet." He dipped her low. Her heart skipped. "Then let me show you why you should." Hours passed. The air grew heavier. The music slowed. Arya stepped away from the crowd, slipping into a side corridor to breathe. Her chest was tight. Her wolf, still dormant, scratched at her mind, restless, as if it sensed something was coming. And then, screaming, it echoed from the courtyard. Sharp, terrified. She ran, lifting her skirts as she bolted down the hall. By the time she burst into the garden, the crowd had gathered in a terrified half-circle. A body lay on the marble, torn open, not just bitten. Ripped. Arya pushed through. Her stomach turned. A young vampire. His throat was slashed, not with fangs, but claws. Deep, brutal gouges. Something feral had attacked him. She crouched, ignoring the gasps. She had seen death, smelled it. This was not clean. This was personal. Rayleigh arrived seconds later, flanked by guards. His expression was unreadable, but his voice was like steel. "Lock down the palace. No one leaves." The guests obeyed reluctantly. Whispers turned into panic. Rayleigh knelt beside Arya. "Whoever did this," she said quietly, "wanted to make a message." His jaw clenched. "To me." She glanced up. "Or to us." Back in her chamber, she paced, the moon high above. "Who would be reckless enough to attack during the masquerade?" she asked aloud. Rayleigh stood at her door, arms crossed. "Someone who wants to prove this union makes us weak." "Do you think it's someone from my pack?" He shook his head. "No. I think it's someone who knows about the binding." Arya froze. "You think someone knows we're tied together?" Rayleigh stepped closer. "I think secrets never stay buried in this castle, especially the dangerous ones." Arya pressed a hand to her chest. Her wolf stirred again, stronger this time, not fear, rage. "I felt it again," she whispered. "The wolf. Just now." Rayleigh's eyes sharpened. "Then we don't have much time." She looked at him. at the man she had sworn to hate. "You said you'd make sure I survived," she said. "I will. Then help me find who's behind this." He nodded once. "We start tonight." Down in the dungeon, Arya and Rayleigh questioned the palace guards, the servants, the nobles with shaky alibis. One name kept surfacing: Valen, a vampire general, loyal to the old crown, hated the idea of peace, saw werewolves as beasts to be culled, not partnered. Rayleigh's jaw clenched. "I should have known. He's your subject. He's a problem I never cut deep enough." They found Valen's quarters empty, gone. At sunrise, Arya stood at the balcony, blood-spattered and exhausted. Rayleigh joined her, holding 2 glasses of spiced wine. He handed her one. "Drink," he said. "You've earned it." She accepted, taking a sip. Warm, sweet. Her nerves slowly untangled. "Why do you stay calm through all this?" she asked. He looked out over the palace. "Because if I don't, everything crumbles." She studied his face, too beautiful, too controlled. "What would it take to break your mask?" she asked softly. He glanced at her. "You." Their eyes locked. Hours passed. The air grew heavier, the music slowed. Arya stepped away from the crowd, slipping into a side corridor to breathe. Her chest was tight. Her wolf, still dormant, scratched at her mind, restless, as if it sensed something was coming. And then, screaming, no more words, just silence, and tension like a drawn bowstring. Something had shifted between them, and the war was only just beginning. Chapter 5. Into the Forbidden Woods. The woods beyond the vampire kingdom were not marked on any map. They weren't just ancient, they were forgotten. Hidden under layers of shadow and silence, no moonlight reached the ground there, only slivers of silver that filtered through twisted skeletal trees. No one with sense dared enter them. And yet, that's exactly where Arya was headed. Wrapped in a dark cloak, a dagger at her thigh, she rode behind Rayleigh on a black steed bred for silence. No words passed between them, not since they'd left the castle under the cover of dusk. She didn't ask where they were going, she already knew. The seer had whispered it as she passed, to wake the wolf, find the ruin where moonlight doesn't reach. What sleeps in shadow wakes in blood. She'd read enough ancient texts to know what that meant, the cursed grove. They stopped at the edge of the woods. The scent of damp soil and magic hit her like a punch to the gut. Arya dismounted first. Rayleigh followed, his hand instinctively brushing the hilt of his sword. "You don't have to come," she said. His brows lifted slightly. "You'd rather I leave you alone in a haunted forest?" "I'm not afraid of haunted forests," she muttered. He gave a half smile. "You're not afraid of anything, are you?" "I'm afraid of never finding her," she admitted, eyes locked on the black tree line. "Of staying hollow forever." Rayleigh's smile faded. Without another word, they walked in. The grove was worse than she imagined. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. Even the wind didn't dare breathe here. Trees bled sap like oil. Stones were carved with sigils in forgotten languages. A low hum vibrated through the earth like a warning. Then, up ahead, Arya saw it. A stone circle. Broken pillars rise like jagged teeth from the earth. At the center, a shallow pool as still as glass. The air shimmered around it. Magic, old, hungry. Rayleigh stopped her with a hand on her arm. "Are you sure?" "No," she said, "but I need to do this." She stepped into the circle. The moment her boots crossed the line of stone, her chest tightened. Her vision blurred. Her knees buckled. Pain exploded behind her eyes. And then, she was elsewhere. Not in the forest, not in her body. Floating, burning. A giant silver wolf stood before her, towering, majestic, but chained at the neck, its eyes glowing with rage. "You kept me caged," the wolf growled, its voice like thunder. "I didn't know how to free you," Arya whispered. "You still don't. But you're close. Why were we cursed?" The wolf's lip curled. "Because he feared what we would become. What we are still becoming. He." But the vision cracked, splintering like glass, and then she was back. On her knees, gasping, bleeding from her nose. Rayleigh knelt beside her. Arya, look at me." She did. Her eyes glowed faintly gold, just for a moment, and then it faded. "I saw her," she whispered. "My wolf. She's real." Rayleigh exhaled slowly. "And the curse?" She said I'm close, but someone is still holding the chain. He nodded. Then we find them. Together. Later, under the stars, they sat by a small fire. Arya wrapped her arms around herself, her cloak pulled tight. The forest felt less hostile now, but more watchful. She turned to Raelith. I know what you've risked by coming here. If the council finds out, they'll threaten war. Again. Why would you do that for me? His gaze met hers. Because I believe in you, Arya. And because I think the wolf inside you is the only thing that might save us all. She stared at him, heart racing. You're not who I thought you were, she said. I'm still dangerous, he replied. So am I. A long pause stretched between them. Then, softly, if we make it through this, she said, what happens next? Raelith's expression turned unreadable again. Then we face the truth. About you, about me, about everything we were forced to become. They didn't touch. They didn't need to. The silence was enough. For now. Chapter 6. The Council's Ultimatum. The palace loomed against the twilight sky like a dark cathedral of secrets. Its towering spires and endless halls no longer seemed unfamiliar to Arya, but they didn't feel like home either. Not yet. She walked beside Raelith through the grand corridor. Her steps were steady, her expression unreadable, but inside, everything had shifted. Since the cursed grove, something in her had awakened. Not fully, but enough that she no longer felt hollow. The wolf was no longer sleeping, and she would never be the same. They were barely through the palace doors before the guards intercepted them. My king, one said, bowing stiffly. The High Council demands your presence. Immediately. Raelith didn't flinch, then let them wait, but Arya put a hand on his arm. No, let's see what they want. He met her eyes. You already know what they want. Then we go in prepared. The council chamber was a cold, circular room lit by chandeliers made from bones of magical beasts. 12 high-backed thrones curved along the edge like the teeth of a great beast. The council members sat like statues, draped in black, silver, and blood-red robes. Vampires ancient enough to remember when humans were myths and wolves were hunted for sport. High Lord Theron, the oldest and most venomous, leaned forward with a glint of disgust in his eyes. So the pet has returned. Arya didn't blink. You summoned us. Speak. A ripple of tension passed through the chamber at her boldness. Raelith's lips twitched, but he said nothing. Theron sneered. There's been another attack, this time on one of the blood sanctuaries near the border. 4 vampires are dead, one of our elders, slaughtered. Raelith stiffened. What are you saying? We believe it was done by her people. Arya stepped forward. That's a lie. Theron's eyes narrowed. And yet the evidence says otherwise. Wolf claw marks. Wolf scent. Do you deny it? I do. Then you'll have no objection to us investigating your pack. Raelith spoke before she could. No one steps foot into werewolf territory without my approval. This is not your decision alone, Theron snapped. Your bride, he said the word with disgust, has brought more chaos than peace. Arya's fists clenched. Then tell me, she said coldly, how killing the only bridge between our species helps you win this war. Silence. She took another step forward. You don't want peace, you want control, and when you couldn't get it through Raelith, you turned on me. Theron stood, voice rising. You speak out of turn, mutt. Before anyone could react, Arya's power surged. Her eyes flashed gold, her voice dropped an octave, echoing with something deeper. Say that again, she growled. The chamber dropped into stunned silence. Even Theron faltered. Raelith stood slowly, his voice dangerously calm. She is not a mutt, she is my wife, and your future queen. Speak to her like that again, and I will show you what true power means. The threat hung in the air like a blade. Theron sat back, seething. The youngest counselor, a woman named Calith, finally broke the silence. We'll give you 3 days, she said, to prove the werewolves weren't behind the attack. If you fail, the alliance is dissolved, and with that, the council adjourned. Later that night, in Raelith's war room, Arya paced while Raelith stood at the map table, fingers steepled. They're setting us up, she said. They want the alliance to break, he agreed, and they want me to lose control. Arya slammed her hands on the table. If they declare war, my people will be hunted. Again. Raelith looked at her. No, not again. She stopped, surprised at the certainty in his voice. I won't let them destroy everything we've built, however fragile it is. He moved around the table, closer to her. I believe you, Arya. I believe in your people. Now we just have to prove it. She nodded. I need to return to my pack. If someone's framing us, the scent trail won't lie. You can't go alone. I wasn't planning to. He raised a brow. You're coming with me. 2 hours later, Arya stood in her chamber, strapping blades to her thighs. Her silver armor gleamed under the moonlight. Not decorative, practical. There was a knock. Raelith entered, also dressed for war. Not courtly elegance this time, just black leather, a silver sword, and quiet fury. You're sure about this? He asked. No, she said. But when have we ever had that luxury? He held out his hand. Then let's find the truth. She took it. And in that moment, they weren't just a vampire king and his unwilling bride. They were allies, enemies of the same enemy. And maybe, just maybe, something more. Chapter 7. Blood Ties and Broken Oaths. The forest of the werewolves was nothing like the vampire lands. It was alive, thick with whispering leaves, damp earth, and the scent of pine and ash. It pulsed with raw energy, a steady heartbeat under the moss-covered ground. Every tree, every stone remembered war. Blood soaked into roots, secrets buried in silence. Arya felt it all as soon as she crossed the border. And so did Raelith. His posture shifted, head high, shoulders squared, but his eyes never stopped scanning. She looked at him. You don't have to act like prey. My people don't bite without cause. He smirked. I've learned not to underestimate wolves. Arya's chest tightened. Good, because someone among them had betrayed her. The howls came before the greeting, a low, rising call, then another, closer, sharper. A warning. The pack had felt her return. Within minutes they emerged from the trees, tall figures, barefoot, cloaked in animal pelts and tension. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Amber, silver, steel blue, warriors, family, and at their head, Torin, her brother. She didn't even have time to speak before he reached her and pulled her into a rough embrace. Arya, he said, voice cracking, you're alive. Barely, she murmured, returning the hug for a heartbeat before pulling away. We need to talk, now. His gaze flicked to Raelith, and his mouth curled into a snarl. He shouldn't be here. I invited him. He's the reason. He's not now. We don't have time for old wounds. Raelith stood still, unreadable. Not offering respect, but not challenging either. Torin stepped aside reluctantly. Then let's talk. They gathered in the longhouse, lit by firelight and the scent of sage. The elders sat in a circle, grim and quiet. Warriors lined the walls. No one looked at Raelith, but everyone felt him. Arya stood in the center. There's been a second attack on the vampire lands. More dead. And this time, they found wolf scent at the scene. Growls rippled through the room. That's impossible, one of the elders said. I thought so too, Arya replied, until I smelled the ash myself. The markings were real. Torin's jaw tightened. We've had no scouts cross their border in weeks. No raids, no threats. Raelith finally spoke, voice calm but cutting. Then someone is lying, and if you don't root them out, the alliance dies. The tension spiked. You expect us to take your word? Snapped another warrior. No, Raelith said. I expect you to protect your own. Arya raised a hand. Enough. We're not here to argue. We're here to find the truth. She turned to Torin. Give me access to the tracker records. Every patrol, every scout. I want every name and every step retraced. He hesitated, then nodded. You'll have it. That night, Arya moved through the camp like a shadow, Raelith close behind. I can feel them watching us, he murmured. They're wolves, she said. It's what we do. They reached the old hollow tree where records were stored, etched into bark scrolls and preserved with enchantments. As Arya scanned them, something caught her eye. A patrol unit, assigned to the southern border, led by Daxon. She stiffened. He was one of mine, before I left. Raelith leaned in. He's not on your side anymore. They tracked him to the northern cliffs. He didn't run. just stood there, arms crossed, wind in his hair, eyes glowing gold. "Arya," he said, like he missed her. "Don't," she said, drawing a blade. "Did you do it?" His jaw tightened. It had to be done. Raylath's hand went to his sword. "You framed us," Arya whispered. "Why?" "For freedom," Daxon growled. "We don't belong under a vampire's leash. You think marrying him will save us? You're blind, Arya. You've always been blind." "Then open my eyes," she said. "Tell me what this is really about." Daxon's voice dropped. "The old blood rises again. The curse isn't broken, it's awakening. And your bond with him will doom us all." Arya stepped forward. "You don't understand what I'm becoming." "Neither do you," he snapped. Then he shifted, wolven form, massive, white fur streaked with blood, fangs bared. Arya didn't hesitate. She met him head on. No shift, just instinct. She ducked his lunge, drove her dagger into his side, twisted. Raylath circled behind, blade drawn but letting her lead. Daxon slumped to the ground, groaning. "I'm not your enemy," she said, breathing hard, "but I will become your nightmare if you threaten this peace again." He shifted back, coughing. "Then kill me." She looked at Raylath. He gave her a nod, but didn't speak. Arya turned back to Daxon. "No," she said. "You're going to confess. And you're going to help me end this. Or the next time we meet, I will rip out your throat." Later, as the camp settled into uneasy silence, Raylath and Arya stood at the cliff's edge. "You spared him," Raylath said, "even after what he did." Arya looked out over the trees. Killing him would have satisfied the council, but it wouldn't have solved anything. He nodded, slowly. "You're not the girl I first met in that throne room. And you're not the monster I expected," she replied. Their eyes met. And for the first time, it didn't feel like war. It felt like beginning. Chapter 8, The Moon's Curse. The sacred ruins stood on the edge of the world, perched atop a cliff where the moonlight bled. Silver across cracked stone and ancient glyphs, the temple of Lorithiel had long been abandoned. Its rituals forbidden, its truths buried by fear. But Arya had found it, guided by blood, dreams, and the whisper of her awakening wolf. She stood at the entrance now, her cloak whipping in the wind, Raylath silent beside her. The air thrummed with old magic, wild, untamed, her kind of magic. "It's stronger here," she murmured. "My wolf, it's closer." Raylath nodded. "This place predates the war." She glanced at him. "How do you know that?" "I've read the old texts. The ones sealed in the royal archives. This temple wasn't just sacred to werewolves, it was where the pact was first broken." Arya's heart sank. "You think the curse started here. I think it still lives here." They stepped inside. The temple walls pulsed with veins of silver. Moonlight pooled through holes in the ceiling, illuminating faded murals that seemed to shift when you weren't looking. Arya ran her fingers over the carvings. Wolves howling at the stars, vampires cloaked in shadow, a great flame consuming both. "I dreamed of this place," she whispered, "as a child. Before I even knew what it was." Raylath crouched beside a stone basin at the center. "There's blood magic here, dormant, but potent." He sliced his palm and let a few drops fall into the basin. The temple responded. The murals flared to life. Colors, movement, a story playing out across the walls. Long ago, before the world was divided, there was one realm where vampires and wolves lived under the watch of the moon goddess. But power breeds envy. One vampire king, obsessed with immortality, tried to steal the wolf's connection to the goddess. He drank the blood of a moon-born alpha, a wolf blessed by the divine. The betrayal split the species. In revenge, the moon goddess cursed them both. Wolves would be born with their beasts caged, dormant, until they proved themselves worthy. And vampires, forever thirsting, never full, would lose their ability to feel warmth, love, soul. The curse could only be undone by a union forged in sacrifice, by those descended from the moon-blooded and the night-marked. Arya, Raylath. When the vision faded, Arya was on her knees. Her head throbbed, her chest burned. Raylath knelt beside her. "Are you—" "Descended," she rasped. "From the moon-blooded line, my mother." She always said our blood ran deeper than the forest. Raylath's expression was unreadable. "And I—" He didn't finish the thought. But he didn't need to. She already knew. "You're night-marked," she whispered. "That's why you feel everything, even when you try not to." Silence stretched between them. Then Raelith finally said it. "I was chosen by the council not because of my strength, but because I was different. They feared it. I hid it, but the magic in this place recognizes me." They stood together. Two halves of a prophecy neither asked for. Arya stepped back from the basin. "If the curse is tied to bloodlines, then breaking it requires one of us to die," Raelith finished, voice hollow. She shook her head. "No. There has to be another way. The murals were clear. Sacrifice. We're not sacrificing anyone," she growled, voice cracking. He reached for her, and for the first time she let him touch her. Their fingers intertwined, not out of duty but desperation. "We'll find another way," he said. Together, Arya turned toward the exit, her voice steady. "Then we better make it quick." Outside, the wind howled like a warning. When they reached the cliff's edge again, a figure was waiting, tall, pale, cloaked in crimson robes. Calith, the youngest member of the Vampire Council. Arya tensed. "How did you find us?" Calith's eyes glinted. "I've always known where he runs when he's desperate." Raelith stepped forward. "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," Calith replied smoothly. "The council has declared war. The alliance is broken. Your marriage? Annulled by decree. You're to return to the palace for judgment." Arya's hands balled into fists. "You can't do that." "I already have," Calith said, voice like silk and steel. "The wolves have until sundown tomorrow to surrender. Or burn." Raelith's jaw clenched. "This is treason." Calith smirked. "This is survival." And with a whisper of shadow, she vanished. Arya stared at the spot where Calith had stood. The temple's revelations still echoed through her veins, but now they were buried under something colder, harder. "We have to go back," she said. "To fight?" Raelith asked. "No," she said, eyes hard. "To win." Raelith watched her for a long moment, then nodded. "For the wolves," he said. "For us," she added. And side by side they turned toward the war they never wanted, but could no longer avoid. Chapter 9. Between Fire and Fang, the full moon bled red over the horizon. It wasn't natural, it wasn't right, and every werewolf in the forest felt it. Arya stood at the edge of the gathering cliff, dressed in her war leathers, blades strapped to her thighs, eyes locked on the horizon. The forest behind her bristled with movement, wolves preparing for battle, families whispering farewells, warriors sharpening steel that had tasted vampire blood before. Raelith stood a pace behind her. He hadn't spoken since they returned from the temple, not about the curse, not about the sacrifice, not about Calith's warning. And Arya didn't push. She was afraid of what he might say, because the truth was simple. If it came down to him or her people, she didn't know what she'd choose. And that terrified her more than war. By noon, the vampire army arrived, black armor, crimson banners, bats circling overhead in perfect formation. Hundreds of soldiers, their fangs bared, their eyes glowing like wildfire. At the front stood Calith, draped in ceremonial robes, flanked by vampire generals who had long since abandoned any hope of peace. Raelith moved to stand beside Arya on the front line. "She's not bluffing. She means to burn everything." Arya nodded. "Then we give her something to choke on." Torin let out a low growl behind them. "We outnumber them 2-1. "But they have air advantage," Arya said, "and necromancers hidden among them. If we rush in headfirst, we lose half our strength before we reach their front." "So what do we do?" Torin asked. Arya glanced at Raelith, and he stepped forward. "Let me go to her." She sprinted toward Calith, dodging spells, leaping over broken bodies, Raelith at her side. Calith laughed as they approached. "You think love will save you?" "No," Arya whispered. "But it will end you." She reached into the center of herself, past pain, past fury, and found the tether. The bond between her and Raelith, the ancient magic their bloodlines had been born to wield. Sacrifice, the murals had said, but maybe it didn't mean death. Maybe it meant letting go. Of hate, of fear, of blood-soaked history. "Hold my hand," she said to him. He didn't hesitate. As their fingers met, the world paused. And then, light. A wave of silver and midnight exploded from their joined hands, slamming into Calith's barrier, ripping through her enchantments. She screamed as the curse recoiled, torn from her body like a parasite burned in sunlight. The shadow shattered, and she fell. Silence. Then, cheers. The vampires dropped their weapons. The wolves shifted back to human form, panting and bleeding but alive. Arya collapsed to her knees. Rayleigh caught her. "You did it," he whispered. "We did," she thought. But even as the armies dispersed, even as peace was whispered once more, she knew this was only the beginning. Because the moon goddess had given her power, and power always demanded a price. Chapter 10. The last dawn. 3 days had passed since the battlefield went silent. 3 days since Calith fell. And yet, the scars of war still painted the land. Burnt trees, shattered stone, and blood-soaked earth. Arya stood at the balcony of Rayleith's citadel. The vampire capital was quiet beneath her, its once cold stone warmed by golden light. For the first time in centuries, dawn rose without fear. But peace was never as simple as victory, not when a prophecy still lingered, not when the moon goddess whispered in her dreams. Rayleigh entered the chamber quietly. He didn't wear his armor anymore, just a simple tunic, dark and unadorned, his sword left behind. He looked younger like this, more man than king, more hers than ever before. "You're thinking too loud," he said softly, stepping beside her. Arya didn't smile. "I keep waiting to feel free, but all I feel is unfinished. The curse is broken." The moment he turned his back, she ordered her archers to fire, but the arrows never hit. A gust of wind howled across the field. Arya had shifted, not into her full wolf, but into something in between, a hybrid form, eyes glowing like twin moons, claws dripping with starlight. Her bones cracked and rebuilt mid-air as she leapt across the battlefield, slicing through the incoming arrows like parchment. Gasps rippled through both armies. Rayleigh turned to her, stunned. Arya stood tall, breathless, glowing. "I felt her," she whispered. "The moon goddess. She showed me the truth." Calith snarled. "Kill them both." And the war began. "Is it?" she asked. "Calith's dead. But the prophecy, it still lingers in my blood. I feel it. The magic. The debt." Rayleigh took her hand. "It asked for sacrifice," he said. "You gave up hatred. I gave up power. Maybe that was the cost." Arya leaned into him, her voice barely a breath. "What if it wasn't enough?" Rayleigh looked out at the horizon. "Then we face what comes next. Together." A knock echoed at the chamber door. Torrin entered, eyes lined with exhaustion but shining with pride. The council's assembled. They're waiting for the new queen. Arya blinked. "Queen? You ended the war, Arya," he said. "And not just by marriage. The wolves have voted. They've named you their leader. And the vampires," he glanced at Rayleigh, "they follow him, which means they'll follow you." Arya's breath caught. "I never asked for this." "You earned it," Torrin said. He left them in silence. Later Arya stood before the assembled court. Wolves and vampires, warriors and elders, old enemies are now seated as equals. Rayleigh stood at her side, but this time, he didn't lead. He let her speak. "I never wanted a crown," Arya said, her voice steady. "I didn't want a war. I didn't even want a mate." Soft laughter rippled through the crowd. She smiled faintly. "But I wanted peace. I wanted my people to live without fear. And now that we've bled for it, now that we've sacrificed for it, I swear I'll guard it with everything I am." She paused. "I am wolf. I am a warrior. I am queen. And I will never let history repeat itself." The court erupted in cheers. That night, when the palace had gone quiet, Arya and Rayleigh stood beneath the stars. She rested her head against his chest. "I keep thinking of what could have gone wrong. But it didn't," he murmured. She tilted her head. "And what if it does?" He took her chin gently, lifting her gaze to his. "Then we fight again, as mates, as rulers, as two souls who found each other in the ashes of old hate." She kissed him, slow, deep, final in the way only beginnings could be, because this was their true beginning. Not the arranged marriage, not the battle, but this, the trust forged in truth, the love born from ruin. The vampire king, his concubine no more, now his equal. His queen. Epilogue. A new moon rises. 10 years later the forest had grown again. What war once scorched, time and peace had mended, roots crawling through old bones, ivy swallowing the last ruins of bloodshed. In the heart of the green stood a cottage, modest, woven into the land, and just beyond its porch, under the golden sweep of early evening, 2 children played among the wildflowers, one with wolf eyes, the other with fangs she didn't yet know how to hide. Arya leaned against the doorframe, watching them. Her hair had grown longer. Silver threaded her dark strands now, but she wore it like a crown. She was barefoot, in linen, the moonlight on her skin like a second soul. Raelith appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "They're arguing again," he said, resting his chin on her shoulder. "They're debating," she replied with a smirk. "Moon versus night. Who's faster? Who's stronger? Who gets to lead?" Raelith sighed dramatically. "Sounds familiar." She laughed, soft and low. "You started it." "I married a wolf," he said. "What did I expect?" Arya turned in his arms. "You married me." "I know," he whispered, brushing her lips with his. "And I'd do it again, curse and all." In the capital, the throne sat empty. Not because it was abandoned, but because it no longer ruled in fear. The council, equal parts vampire and wolf, led under guidance, not dominion. The old structures had been burned, and from their ashes rose schools of magic, trade alliances, and sacred unions between species once at war. And from the shadows of history, a new legend had formed. The queen without a wolf who found her power. The king born of night who chose light. And the love that shattered 1,000 years of hate. Later that night, as the children slept curled under soft furs, Arya stood in the doorway of their room. Raelith joined her in silence. "They'll inherit a world we never had," she said. He nodded. "Because you built it." "No," she whispered. "We did." The moon rose high above them, full, bright, peaceful, and for the first time in 1,000 years it did not demand blood. It only watched over them, blessing what had once been cursed,